Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. This is Ashley, and I'm here with Katie, and we are answering some common questions when it comes to plant-based eating. And today we're talking about essential nutrients, specifically vitamin B12, and then also answering some common questions when it comes to your doctor, what labs you should get tested, and what supplements I like. You ready for this, Katie?
I'm ready. Let's go.
So let's dive into vitamin B12 because this is a question that I get a lot, especially on social media of, okay, well, do I need to be supplementing with vitamin B12? I'm new to plant-based, or heck, some people have even been plant-based for years and they're like, well, still, do I need vitamin B12? I eat fortified foods. We're going to go through all of that. But to give a little background on what vitamin B12 is, it's actually produced by bacteria. So it's not produced by animals. It's not produced by plants. It's produced by bacteria that is in the ground. And so animals and plants get it directly or indirectly from this bacteria. And what's interesting is many animal foods contain high amounts of vitamin B12, but the reason is because nowadays livestock are often supplemented with vitamin B12 in their feed. Part of the reason is in like today's sort of like modern hygienic practices, we clean and sanitize our produce really well. And our soil is sort of, just being exposed to different antibiotics and pesticides and a lot of different things there. So really relying on plant foods and even animals relying on plant foods when they're eating and grazing isn't necessarily a reliable source of this bacteria, vitamin B12, which is often why we as humans supplement, and it's often why livestock are supplemented with it. So back in the day, this wasn't an issue because we just ate the food that was, came through from the dirt, this is way, way back in the day. And so we were able to get our vitamin B12 from that. But nowadays, like I said, with how things are sanitized and cleaned so efficiently, that is no longer the case. And the reason vitamin B12 is so important really for any diet, for anyone following any way of eating, is because it's required for the synthesis of blood cells, for our nervous system to function properly, for DNA synthesis. It is a very, very, very important micronutrient in our diet. So it's common for vegans and vegetarians to have a B12 deficiency, yes, but it's actually even common for people not following a vegan and vegetarian diet to have a deficiency. So it's really important that everyone making sure that their vitamin B12 is in a sufficient range. And we'll talk about how to talk to your doctor about that. But specifically, vegans and vegetarians do need to pay attention because the plant-based diet is essentially, void of a reliable source of vitamin B12, which we will talk about more. And deficiency can present itself in many different forms. So symptoms may include fatigue or tingling, feelings of pins and needles in your fingers and toes. It can be as far as like a decline in brain function or disturbance of your nervous system. So again, this is just a very, very important lab to make sure that you are getting checked with your doctor and to make sure that you're getting a reliable source of vitamin B12. With a plant-based diet, supplements are the easiest and most reliable way to prevent a B12 deficiency. Most foods have trace amounts of vitamin B12, so you would have to intake a very high amount of these particular foods. And also too, this comes from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, specifically the Vegetarian Dietetic Practice Group, that fortified foods really aren't a reliable source. They're not considered a reliable source. And so more than likely, it is important that you rely on a reliable source, which is a vitamin B12 supplement. And the great thing is you can get vitamin B12 very, very easily and very, very affordably. There are options that you can take in pill form. You can take sprays. I think there's even like little pieces of paper that you can put on your tongue and let it dissolve. You can get injections. Probably not the most preferred way for most people, but it's a very, very easy supplement to find and take. And I put my favorite supplement in the show notes. This is a B12 supplement that I've been taking for years, and my B12 has been fantastic for years. So another common question that I get, especially with just micronutrients in general, essential nutrients is, well, what about a multivitamin? Like, shouldn't I just take a multivitamin? And wouldn't that be like the most efficient way to make sure that I'm getting everything I need? And really, yes, you totally could. The research goes back and forth on whether or not a multivitamin is actually helpful. The conclusions are kind of mixed. Overall, multivitamins are deemed harmless. They just may be giving you expensive pee, which we talk about all the time. So, really, a better investment could be relying on either plant foods to get everything that you need. We talk about eating the rainbow all the time, eating variety, making sure that you're getting a variety of different foods, different colors, so that you're getting all those micronutrients that you need. But it is important to make sure that you are getting certain labs checked annually to make sure, if you do need to supplement with anything, that you can do that. So vitamin B12, without a doubt, is one of those things, especially if you're plant-based, whether you're transitioning or whether you've been plant-based for a decade. I always recommend with my one-on-one clients, especially, to make sure that they're talking with their doctor, telling them that they are plant-based so that they can get their vitamin B12 checked annually. That is very, very important, something that I recommend. So it's very important that you communicate with your doctor. Hopefully they support you with your journey. That's a whole nother podcast, but it's very important to communicate with your doctor that you're plant-based so that you can get your vitamin B12 checked annually. And again, like we said, it's not a deficiency that you want to play around with.
And not every, I guess, regular blood panel includes the B12, right? You have to make sure that you have to ask your doctor to make sure that they've run that special.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Because not every doctor is just going to run it annually. And so it is important to make sure that you tell them that you're plant-based, because more than likely they're going to want to run it annually and also want to know what your labs are to make sure that if you need to up your supplement or reduce your supplement, you can do so. And exactly, it doesn't necessarily come in that, complete panel that doctors typically order. Okay. So in addition to vitamin B12, it's like, well, okay, I'm plant-based. If I'm not taking a multivitamin, then what other supplements do I need? And so again, this goes back to communicating with your doctor, getting your labs checked, because you might not need a whole lot of supplements. You may or may not. And so it's, again, really important to have that open line of communication with your doctor or whoever is checking your blood work. But one thing I do recommend getting checked as well, in addition to vitamin B12, is make sure that you are getting your vitamin D checked. That's something that is also really important because it's something that you can supplement with, again, pretty easily. And it's also a very, very important fat soluble vitamin in our diet. And it plays a large role in just a lot of different functions. It's also called the sunshine vitamin, but not all of us, we're not all of us are out in the sun, or even if we are out in the sun, that doesn't mean our vitamin D level is going to be, quote, normal. So it's important to get your vitamin D level checked. And also, too, in addition to that, I always recommend with my clients to make sure that they are getting their iron levels checked. This doesn't include just iron, but it includes things like ferritin and your saturation and a bunch of other things, your TIBC. So your doctor will, know what to check there, but make sure that you're getting those checked as well, in addition to your vitamin B12 and your vitamin D. And the reason I always say iron too is because this is the number one worldwide deficiency. And so it's important that you're getting that checked because it's a very common deficiency, not just for plant-based eaters. It's a common deficiency throughout the entire world. So it's important to get that checked with your doctor as well. Okay, Katie, since we're talking about vitamin B12, vitamin D, iron, all these labs that you need to be getting checked. So for those of you who don't know, Katie is out traveling the country in a van. She is living the hashtag van life. But Katie, I've got to ask, when was the last time you've maybe had your labs checked? How do you feel like you are doing in this area?
Well, I'm a work in progress. But I definitely had my labs checked. Maybe the last time was 2 years ago. I think it was right before COVID. And so everything's been discombobulated since then. But I knew I was transitioning to a plant-based diet and definitely wanted to get kind of a baseline with my doctor. So it was time for my yearly physical anyway. And I was low in a lot of stuff. So I was definitely low in B12. So they actually gave me a prescription for shots or injections. And I've always been low in iron. I think that's very common for a lot of women to be slightly anemic. And vitamin D was low. So back then I was working 15 hours a day, all inside. So that makes sense. And now I'm outside all the time. So my vitamin D is probably really good. But I went to that appointment and didn't do much.
And I
So
got after her.
yeah, I got my levels checked and then nada. Which is really funny because some of the deficiencies that we've been talking about recently, I didn't really I had kind of chalked them up to other things. So like I've had trouble sleeping. I've gotten into running, and sometimes I've been very fatigued even though I've eaten right and done everything right in that department. But when I'm talking about my vitamins being low, like they weren't just low, they were low. Like that just seems, crazy not to set yourself up for success like that, right? So Ashley got after me, and I got my vitamins, and I honestly can say like I feel like I'm sleeping better. I feel like I'm not as fatigued, and so that makes sense. You get more rest, you're not as tired, right? So it just makes sense to set yourself up for success to be able to face the day, right? It's something easy to do. You put them on your counter, they're there. Like Ashley said, they're super affordable. So why wouldn't you do it? You take time in your day to do all these other things, so why wouldn't you do this that helps you function at your best, right? It's a new normal for me. So I have my vitamins up there, which is so funny because my dogs get their vitamins, but I hadn't been eating my vitamins.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just funny, like how your priorities need to shift, right? So Ashley got onto me, and so now I am full of all the vitamins that I need as a plant-based person.
That's such a great point too, is like Katie said, she had her labs checked and she noticed, well, she realized what she was deficient in. She didn't do anything about it for a little while, but now she is doing something about it, and she's able to target those specific vitamins. And it doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong with your diet. Like some people just have a natural tendency of, like vitamin D is a great example. If you're indoors a lot, and you're not maybe eating a lot of fortified foods that have vitamin D in it. And even if you are, your vitamin D might be low. And the same with iron. If you're having heavy periods, or there's different circumstances there where your iron just may naturally be lower. And again, same with B12, the plant-based diet just doesn't have a whole lot of reliable sources of vitamin B12. And even really with any diet, it's important to make sure that you're supplementing and getting those labs checked so that you can supplement accordingly, which is what Katie is doing now.
So I'm actually really excited when I get back home to go, and my last physical was before COVID. So I'd like to go and get one and see, after supplementing, like how they've changed. And so then I'll have a new baseline. And, it's just another reminder that going to the doctor, which none of us really like every year, it's important to get that baseline. So when something's out of whack, you can fix it, and you can fix it sooner rather than later.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what's important as well, is that if you are getting your labs taken annually, then you're able to respond quicker because you're getting them taken annually versus waiting several years. Some people I've talked to have waited like 5 years, 10 years. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to get these taken just so that we have a baseline of where they're at and see if we can supplement accordingly. So by no means, if you're plant-based, you have to supplement with all these different things. Again, it's just really helpful to communicate with your doctor and check to see if there is anything that you are deficient in that would be helpful for you to supplement in. And there's obviously a lot of natural ways to boost different things. Like iron is a great example. There are cast iron skillets that you can use, or you can just make sure that you're eating lots of leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables, and making sure that you're having a source of vitamin C with them.
And I like to think of this as a form of self-care. Like sometimes you just have to reframe it in your mind. Like when I think doctor, I think scary, I think inconvenient, I think copay, right? But I really want to reframe it in my mind. So I do it on a regular basis as a form of self-care, right? Just like going to get a facial, just like going to get a massage, manicure. So making sure that your body is functioning the way it should be and getting these, baseline numbers every year, it should be a form of self-care because we are our advocate for ourselves. We're the only one looking out for those numbers. So it really has to be us to make it a priority.
Yeah, you're right. In a way, it's like an investment back into yourself, back into your health. That's a great point. All right. So, our challenge for you is if it's been over a year since you've had your labs checked, maybe make a doctor's appointment and get some of these things checked, especially your vitamin B12, vitamin D, and your iron as well. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to our discussion of essential nutrients, especially vitamin B12. If you do have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Plant Center Nutrition. And also check out the show notes. There's some great information there, including some supplements, also the labs that we recommend you asking your doctor to get checked annually, and any additional labs as well. All right, Katie, thanks for being here. See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Until next time, keep thriving.